Welcome to the Health Revolution, a show for people who want straight answers about their health, their body, and their life. Here we cut through trends, through myths, and recycled advice to break down what actually works and why. We explore physical strength, resilience, and mindset through real science, real experience, and real conversations. You'll hear from guests who faced challenge, adapted, and moved forward with intention. No hype, no shortcuts, just clarity you can use. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, health and fitness expert, speaker, and a mom who understands real life. This is the Health Revolution. We begin now. Today we're on our way to meet with Tina Jacobs. She is the founder of Silk Life Medical in Colorado, and we are diving into all things hormones. Today we will discuss the hormone wake-up call, why it's important for us to discuss the different options that are there for us as women over 40, but not just for us, but how to combat aging, stress management, and the physiological changes in the body. We're excited to get started today. So Tina, I am excited to talk to you today for a bunch of reasons. Number one, you are, co-owner of Silk Life Medical, and you have lots of different accolades. And so I want to start off by asking you, your motto is, it's not your fault, it's your hormones.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us the meaning behind that.
Yeah. I mean, my experience of trying to do all the right things, like being obsessive over what I was eating, exercising all the time, and then like going to my doctor and being like, yeah, just keep eating less. Like when I complained of things like, being exhausted and still gaining weight despite being pretty healthy. And so when I figured out and looked deeper and found that there was a hormone imbalance, I just realized how much shame there was there, that it like instantly took away, because it wasn't really that I was doing anything wrong. And so I want to be able to share that with other women and be like, okay, like you don't need to keep stressing about, finding the next thing that you need to do perfectly. Let's look deeper and find out what's really going on.
When does perimenopause start? Because I know there's a whole lot of talk around it, and in recent information has shifted in these last few years.
Yeah.
When does it typically start?
So we know that, and perimenopause is when your testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone start to change, right? And so technically, we know this typically starts to happen after age 35, which not usually when we start thinking about perimenopause. But for, in recent years, with things like, toxin exposure, our diets maybe not being as good, even when we try to eat healthy, it not being as nutrient dense. We do see people noticing these changes sooner than ever before. But I would say, in my experience with thousands of women, that typically the average age where you notice something enough that it might be worth looking deep into is by age 40.
So how come it's been hard for doctors to get on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of predictions we can make there. We know one cause of that is the WHO study that into late 90s into 2000, put on a saying that that hormones cause cancer, and obviously that's terrifying to women. On one day, thousands of women went off hormone therapy because of it. Now, pretty immediately afterwards, we found that that's not what the study showed. It showed us that, yes, if you go through menopause and restart hormones in your 70s, there could be some negative side effects, but that's pretty much makes sense, right? But if you continue to keep your hormone levels optimal, starting in your 40s and just keeping it that way, you're actually preventing disease. So preventing diabetes, obesity, osteoporosis, and even inflammatory conditions leading to certain cancers. And so for a long time, the FDA still was in the old boat of avoid estrogens because we don't want to increase women's risk of cancer. And so even if women were having symptoms as early age 35, we kind of just told them that's normal. There's nothing that we need to address here. And now it's really starting, there's a lot of big changes happening higher up that are going to make this so much more accessible to women too, and have them be taken much more seriously early on.
I read a study, I came across some data that says that it wasn't until 1993 that women's bodies were studied in a much more detailed way. I'm trying to remember the study where we were not, that the changes that we were going through was not as looked at, and that there wasn't prevalent studies until, and that was, I mean, that's 33 years ago. That was literally.
And even today, like the history of scientific research is like we study men because their hormones are consistent compared to ours, and that hormone changes are a problem when it comes to studies because you can't keep all the variables the same. And so we avoid testing on women in general and just apply everything that we learn about men to women. Even today, there's billions spent on medical research, like 3% is on women. So like, yes, it's good we're doing it on some women, especially, you know, that 3% is probably related to therapies for menopause and things like that. But these hormones do make us who we are as well. And so assuming that that crossover exists may not be a safe assumption.
Why should we be paying attention to this at a younger age? Why should women in their 30s start to home in on the hormonal changes, even though 40 and up it almost seems like that's the assumed milestone where things start to change, but why should we be paying attention in the 30s?
Yeah, well, one, every woman's different. So some women are going to have more dramatic changes before age 40. And if you feel like things have changed, it's worth getting that baseline. You know, worst case scenario, you take a look and you see where your levels are at and things are good, we need to look elsewhere. But in most cases, there's always room to optimize your health. And even when it comes to, you know, before you go into, you know, completely into perimenopause, the health of your adrenals, the health of your thyroid, all decide how easy that transition's going to be. And so looking at those hormones sooner than later, always going to be beneficial.
Do you see a trend with what you just said, the thyroid and the adrenal system, that maybe we're not paying attention in society? Are there some quiet changes that are maybe alarming?
Oh, yeah.
What's going on? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, you know, it shouldn't, perimenopause and menopause are just the ovaries producing those three hormones less, right? And then eventually those ovaries retiring. And so it shouldn't directly impact your thyroid hormones and adrenal hormones, but then we typically see changes in women around that same time. And now part of that, I think, is there's some, you know, overlap as far as, you know, these hormones all interacting together in the body. But two, like this same time of like 35 to 50 is now like the most intensive, stressful time of our lives as women. A lot of times women are waiting till then to have kids. They're also, this is the time when they're finally at the peak of their career.
Yep.
And so it's no surprise that the body's under more stress. And if we're expected to do it all, we're probably not doing all of the things we could to take care of ourselves. And so that's where things like the adrenals are just much more sensitive to high physical and mental stress.
I love how you point this out because I don't think we pay enough attention to stress management.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like we are under fire a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about the role that stress plays on hormones with women and even men? And what are you noticing in the patients that you work with?
Yeah. I mean, when we're under stress, initially we're producing a lot of cortisol. And our body, you know, is made to handle short-term stress, like running from a bear. Your cortisol should go up. That should give you some energy to get the heck out of there.
Yes.
But in our society, especially as women, we're experiencing much more prolonged high stress, whether it's trying to manage little kids and the pressures of your career and taking care of a sick family member all at the same time. It's not making time for our bodies to actually recover. And so instead, eventually your body can't maintain that high cortisol. It actually drops off. Your cortisol production just actually gets lower than normal, which is what leads to that, chronic fatigue feeling and that crash at the end of the day, is that by the end of the day, your cortisol levels are very low. And this, not only that alone can make you not feel good and impact things like energy, but then when we look at sex hormones like the testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, when your body's under stress, it stops prioritizing production of those hormones completely. And this is not something that's just happening to women in their 40s. I had a patient yesterday that was 27. She's
young.
like, I'm getting married and starting a family. I just started this new business. And she had a lot of high stressors. And she had very low levels of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And you could see signs in her adrenals that it was caused by either physical or mental stress. Now, before talking to her, I looked at her labs, and so I knew something was causing that. We just needed to find out what it was. But she was doing all these things, doing very intense workouts, which were actually working against her. Because when your adrenals are fatigued, you actually, like, those more moderate, consistent workouts are going to be more beneficial. And so that's why even at that age, it's helpful to know like what your levels are at, because it can guide you on things like your exercise or eating habits, and not always mean that you need to take hormones.
So in the calm bag, it has GABA, theanine, and taurine. So theanine, which is B1, which is also in our B complex, but it also helps with the stress response levels. It also helps with the neurological transmitters in our brain. Combined with the GABA, and then you add taurine to it. Taurine is a non-essential amino acid in our body, but it's found in our heart, our brain, and our eyes. So in my personal opinion, it's very essential in our lives. But taurine has a calming effect as well. When I was battling all my AFib issues, I was taking high doses of taurine because that would help with my AFib. It would help with the palpitations I was having. And it also helped with the anxiety of having the palpitations because I knew what was going on, and so taurine helps a lot with that as well. So those three together create such a wonderful concoction that just really just calms people down.
Introducing Launchpad, the perfect partner to help you launch your dream project to the world. We know that time is of the essence, and we're here to help you make the most of it. With Launchpad, you'll get access to the most advanced digital tools and strategies to take your idea from a mere concept to a fully fledged success. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned pro, we have everything you need to make your mark in the world. Launchpad, your ultimate launch partner.
So I find it fascinating that you talk about the stress, how she was, in the case of your patient that had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Did she realize that that was working against her? And then this is the second part. So do a lot of women realize how this impacts the ability to drop fat if they're wanting to drop fat?
No, yeah. Like one, she was doing these intensive workouts thinking it was helping her. And when done in the right way, for many women, those workouts can be great. But in her case, it was working against her, and there was no way for her to know that unless she was looking at her labs and, or had a great understanding of what these symptoms really mean. And so that's where understanding that can be such a good guide to what your body really needs. And I think most of us don't understand the impact of stress. We hear about things like, high stress causes high blood pressure, and down the road I'm going to have a heart attack, something like that. But we're not thinking about that right now.
Yeah.
But it can impact things like metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
So like when your body's under stress, especially when you've had those adrenal changes and it's downregulated your, sex hormone production, that means your body is going to try and protect itself. And one of the ways our body naturally protects itself is holding on to fat so that we have energy for later. Because it's predicting that there's going to be stress. And we don't know, when we'll need it. So that's where storing it as fat makes sense.
So I think a lot of women don't realize that if that is what's happening, if you feel like you're imploding or if you're ready to explode, that sort of thing, that even if they're wanting to have better health and a better body and drop excess fat, that it is going against them.
Yeah. I mean, like in her case, just doing, going on walks every day, doing some just light strength training, things like that are actually going to be more effective at burning fat than continuing to do the HIIT workouts daily.
And can you talk about that? So there's a lot of conversation that there are women who want to do HIIT, and for the audience, it is high intensity interval training where you do have short bursts of rest periods. And so I've come across women who have said, but I like doing HIIT workouts, or it used to bode well for me before and I had fun. What would you say to the woman who doesn't want to let go of her HIIT classes or HIIT workouts?
Well, let's support your body so that's possible, for it to thrive with that. But it might mean temporarily backing off and building up giving your body what it needs, so then it can do well with those types of workouts. Like the goal isn't, okay, for the rest of your life, now we're just taking it easy. It's, no, let's take a second. Your body's yelling for help. Let's answer it. Let's see what it needs. It probably needs some, important nutrients. It probably needs some extra support, some extra stress reduction techniques. And then you'll be in a good place to be able to do those more intensive things,
I want to talk specifically about HRT. And can you tell the viewers and listeners what HRT is and how that has been integrative with what you do today with your practice?
Yeah, so HRT is hormone replacement therapy. What we work with at Silk Life is BHRT, so that'll be bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And this is an important part for most women once they get to a certain point in perimenopause. And the reason for that is, like we talked about before, the process of perimenopause is those ovaries not being able to produce estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone like they used to. Once you go through menopause, that means the ovaries have officially retired and are not able to produce that anymore. And because of that previous study, there was a lot of women who, believed the healthiest thing was to tough it out and not have those hormones. But with all the research we have today, we know it's not only safe, but it's protecting your longevity. And so while I always guide women as far as, this is what your lab means, these are all the options on the table, I'm a big proponent of using bioidentical hormone replacement therapy.
Is there a difference? So can you talk, what's the difference between the two? Is there a standard HRT and then bioidentical? What makes it different?
Yeah, so bioidentical just means that it's biologically the same as what your body produces. And so when you're working with a compounding pharmacy, they're sourcing it from natural ingredients like yams and then synthesizing it so that it can be used as a tablet, injection, whatever that is. Now, a lot of times when you're getting synthetic hormones from your OBGYN or primary care. Some of those are going to be bioidentical still, some of them not. But a lot of things like, a traditional one was like Premarin is not going to be biologically the same as our own estrogen. And so as someone who, guides women as far as optimizing their health, I just always see the advantage of replacing it with exactly what your body had before to limit side effects and have the best response.
So I've heard a lot of women have concerns about today breast cancer or a preventative approach with using HRT. What is your take on the concern that maybe breast cancer is in a woman's family, and she expresses that concern that she's afraid and doesn't want to increase her chances? Are there any women that fall into that contraindication of not taking HRT because of that?
Yeah, there's always going to be exceptions. And, in most cases, if there's not a significant family history, then, it's not going to be a problem. Because the thing that we're talking about is that estrogen isn't going to cause cancer. That's why that label was removed from the FDA guidelines. But there are very specific types of cancers that when you have estrogen in your body and it attaches to that cancer, it can support that cancer's growth. And so that's why understanding your personal medical history, ideally what type of cancer it was specifically, and if it was activated by that, and then also weighing out the pros and cons of like how high is that risk versus how much preventative care can the estrogen offer. And it's a very personal conversation. There definitely are women who have a history of breast cancer on estrogen, which, 10 years ago would have been very controversial and is much more common today because we know balancing these hormones to some extent has a very protective effect. And so it's very personalized as far as making that decision.
So with HRT, what are some exciting elements that really grab your attention? Like how we're advancing in this being such a great tool for so many women to use. And just for the record, I'm on HRT and you've just been instrumental with me on that. What are some exciting things that you're noticing that the landscape is changing for women tapping into this?
Yeah, I mean that the change in the FDA labeling is huge. Okay. The reason for that is, even though I can explain all day that the research doesn't show that this causes cancer, if the FDA in the background is saying it is, it's hard to educate women on what's actually happening. And so the fact that they've taken that label off, that estrogen is not causing breast cancer, really has women who might have before just been too scared to even consider it, now thinking oh, okay, maybe this is something for me. And it's just going to increase availability to women as well. Because of the FDA labeling, it also meant that OBGYNs and primary carers were very strict with not even considering estrogen until the woman was in full-blown menopause, where they need it the most, and really only giving them just enough to resolve hot flashes. Now, if you're someone in perimenopause or menopause, there's much more than just hot flashes. There's that horrible, intense brain fog caused by low estrogen because we have thousands of estrogen receptors in our brain that if suddenly not getting estrogen, trying to focus feels impossible. There's that impact on our energy, our fat burning ability, and so many aspects of our mental health because of the way that it impacts our mood. And so a lot of things across the board that were somewhat being ignored for a long time in standard medicine. Now, there's more availability there, but then also with the landscape changing with what compounding pharmacies are able to do with making very specific treatments for women, and offering many more options than we used to have. That's also making it much easier for a lot of women to have it as an option. For example, a lot of times we just relied on a combination cream, which can be messy, can rub off on your pets, not always the best option. But now we have so many different options to get this same bioidentical estrogen, testosterone, or progesterone, or safe oral formulations, the pellets, the dissolvable tablets, all kinds of forms that really we can make it work with your lifestyle.
Welcome to Renew Laser and Skincare, where beauty meets technology. From laser hair removal and anti-aging treatments to facial sculpting, acne care, and injectables, our expert team helps you look and feel your best with customized, results-driven care. Located in Littleton, Colorado, we offer a comfortable, welcoming space and cutting-edge treatments tailored just for you. Visit renewlaserandskincare.com to book your transformation today. Renew Laser and Skincare, where confidence begins.
Hi, I'm Adriana, and welcome to Fit Bites. Today we're uncovering the subtle signs of perimenopause, the hormonal transition that can begin as early as your mid-30s, definitely in your 40s. Now, for us women, it's often misunderstood or missed altogether. You might notice irregular cycles, hard time going to sleep, mood swings, or sudden anxiety that just feels out of nowhere. But it's not in your head, it's hormonal. And it's now recognized that there are 66 symptoms of perimenopause that women experience that also evolve into menopause. For men, a similar shift happens too. It's called andropause, where testosterone declines and symptoms like fatigue, like low motivation and body composition changes, that they creep in. Now, if your energy is down, your sleep is off, or your body isn't responding the way that it used to, it might be time to get your hormones evaluated. Don't brush this off whatsoever. This is extremely important, especially as we're trying to understand our bodies. Early awareness allows you to take action, whether through lifestyle changes, nutrition, strength training, or medical support. Even more important, stay tuned for more Fit Bites with Adriana. So testosterone comes up in hormone conversations, and I almost feel like whenever I've talked to women in the past, they're not quite sure what the significance that testosterone plays. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Are there levels in which, what happens when it's too low? What happens, how high can it realistically go for women who are deficient? All of that.
Yeah, testosterone is one of those 3 hormones produced by the ovaries that we lose. And we know that there's receptors for it all over the body impacting our health. But until recently, it was often ignored because it wasn't causing hot flashes, which is what estrogen does. Now, a lot of women, even today, will hear about testosterone and think, I don't want to be a man. That's a man's hormone.
Right.
And the truth is, men do have about 5 times the amount of testosterone that we do. But that little bit that we do have goes such a long way. It plays a really key role in our energy and drive. And not just sex drive, which we'll hear about with testosterone, but also that, women will describe it as their driving career, drive to get out of bed, that up and go feeling, which we thought was just willpower, but there's also a component of hormones here. And then playing a role in metabolism. So testosterone's responsible for helping with the absorption of glucose into the muscle. When that's not happening, that's part of the reason why after menopause, diabetes becomes so much more common in women, or pre-diabetes, or just some mild insulin resistance, making it harder to lose weight. Also impacting skin moisture, also impacting the sex drive and enjoyment of sex, and all things that make our life enjoyable. And until oftentimes, in primary care, because there's no current FDA-approved form of testosterone for women, there is for men, it really just doesn't get talked about or even looked at on labs.
Do you think it's because it just isn't as important, or has historically not been recognized as important in women? Or do you think that the message clinically, on the clinical side of things, is not being broadcast in a way that it lands the way it's supposed to land?
I think that it's something that we haven't studied enough in the past for it to be as important as, the other two hormones, estrogen and progesterone. But the studies that we do have just show such a significant impact of having optimal testosterone versus not having it. Not just on how we feel day to day as far as like our mood, but also playing a role in protecting our health long term, as far as cardiovascular health, as far as brain health, all of these things that often get missed because we're not even checking it on labs or giving it the attention it deserves.
I hear women talk about PCOS and Hashimoto's. It comes up and they feel frustrated. Can you talk about what PCOS is for those who don't know, and the connection with why it's not an impossible condition for women to be diagnosed with? And then also, can you talk about the tie to Hashimoto's as well, and then hormones and all that implies?
Definitely. And PCOS can happen at a young age, so typically we're seeing it in women in their 20s is a very common diagnosis age. And often a lot of it is triggered by diet and lifestyle. And so initially what we're going to see is that higher insulin resistance, maybe not progress to diabetes at this point, but high enough that your body isn't processing glucose as well as it should.
So is it more of a lifestyle condition, or does lifestyle play a bigger role than what we realize?
It plays a big role.
Okay.
So
and for the record, for our viewers and listeners, it's PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Yeah. And really, for diagnosis, what you need is that high glucose or hemoglobin A1C, evaluating how your body responds to sugars, combined with a high testosterone. This is part of your body overcompensating for that high glucose in the body, and trying to, since testosterone is what helps with the absorption of glucose into the muscle, the body's trying to fix itself. But a lot of times it can make it worse, because just like any of those other hormones, like estrogen or progesterone, too little or too much can cause a lot of the same symptoms sometimes. And so a lot of times women with PCOS will have symptoms of high testosterone, which is like acne or hair thinning or abnormal hair growth. And in those cases, obviously it's all about getting your testosterone back to a good balance, but also really targeting, the lifestyle issues that contribute to that. Now, we say polycystic ovarian because typically these women will develop cysts on their ovaries that can be seen with an ultrasound, but that's not always the case, and it's not even needed for diagnosis.
And what about Hashimoto's? What's the tie there?
Hashimoto's is going to be the cause of low thyroid function for many women. And so there's going to be these thyroid antibodies that are essentially attacking the thyroid itself and causing your thyroid to be less effective. Now, recent research has shown there's a lot of link to inflammation and your risk of having something like Hashimoto's. There's also genetic predisposition to that. But your thyroid plays a key role in your metabolism. And a lot of times women will have these thyroid antibodies, but it's caused their thyroid to function just enough to make the cut into normal, but they're suffering because they're exhausted, they're depressed sometimes things like constipation, not able to lose weight, but because they're still just barely in that normal range, it gets ignored. And so really working with someone who wants to optimize your hormones in the case of Hashimoto's and other thyroid disorders becomes even more important.
So what would you say to a woman who has, and I've come across a dear friend of mine who had her thyroid removed. And so in those cases, what is your preferred way to support patients who have had either thyroid cancer or much more serious conditions with their thyroid?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a combination of things, because sometimes it's going to be relevant to replace the thyroid hormones, and that's going to be thyroid hormone replacement. Other cases, that's not the right route, where we're going to support the body in other ways. But similarly to any woman's condition, it's not just looking at the thyroid. These things are all connected. And even if we have one area not working as well, then those other areas just become even more important. And so just making it to just barely normal isn't going to cut it anymore.
Have you run across women who have been frustrated because of whether it's hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism, that they're just things are a little out of whack? And what do you notice a difference between those two conditions?
Oh yeah, I mean, in both, a lot of times women aren't getting enough help, enough help to really make it so that it's not having a huge impact on their life. With low thyroid function, that can essentially slows you down, because thyroid's so essential to metabolism. And if we're just getting you to barely normal with thyroid treatment, a lot of times that isn't enough, and for you to actually feel good day to day. And similarly with hyperthyroid, where you have too much thyroid, this can cause anxiety and, a lot of conditions related to that overactivation. If your levels are also barely getting into the normal range, that can leave you still symptomatic. And so really being willing to optimize and bring to that balance is so key. And it really applies to all the hormones, whether we're talking about, thyroid, adrenal, these sex hormones like with perimenopause of testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen, that it's not just about getting more. A lot of times that's the misconception. A lot of men getting testosterone just want more. And the truth is like, you can feel just as crappy on the other end. And so it's really about not just getting a prescription and getting it as high as you can. It's about working with someone who's going to balance it, not just based off of the average numbers of people in our country, but also like your body specifically.
How often should a woman get her hormones tested?
I would say after age 35, especially if you're noticing anything changing as far as your health. It might be that mood just isn't staying where it used to be. It might be mild, where like you're just aren't able to maintain that consistent energy. It's worth getting that detailed baseline of seeing exactly where things are at, knowing like where you can optimize your health. Have all those options on the table, whether you do something with it or not. Now, for women who have started into perimenopause, I want to see, that detailed hormone assessment at least yearly, but that's going to vary depending on the patient too, because a lot of times some women will have, slower changes, some faster, where it really needs to be customized.
Welcome to Renew Laser and Skincare, where beauty meets technology. From laser hair removal and anti-aging treatments to facial sculpting, acne care, and injectables, our expert team helps you look and feel your best with customized, results-driven care. Located in Littleton, Colorado, we offer a comfortable, welcoming space and cutting-edge treatments tailored just for you. Visit renewlaserandskincare.com to book your transformation today. Renew Laser and Skincare, where confidence begins.
One question I do have that it's on everyone's minds, GLP-1s.
Yeah.
Your take on it, what do you see? Anything that is exciting or a cautionary tale that would be important to understand, since a lot of people are looking at GLP-1s?
I know. People tend to be like on such extreme sides of this issue, right? But really, I mean, I think it can be used as a tool if used in the right way. But there's a lot of ways to do it wrong, and it's really easy to do it wrong, unfortunately. Now, because they're so widely available, a lot of patients are, getting the GLP because they need to lose weight, but not really understanding what's happening in their body. And so what can happen in that case is, a woman is not eating the healthiest diet, not, exercising as much as she should or drinking as much water, all these habits, we talk about. And she gets on a GLP just to lose the weight. A lot of times they'll start a GLP and they're not changing anything else about their life. So that means they're still eating that crappy food. They're just eating 50% of that crappy food. Now they're not only getting the damaging effects still of that crappy food, but now they're nutrient deficient. Mm. And when you're nutrient deficient, that same thing that we talked about with the adrenals and high stress, that's high physical stress on the body. So now that's impacting your adrenal health and making it so potentially you could downregulate hormone production. But also when the adrenals are under stress, you hold on to fat. Now the GLP-1s, if you're not eating a lot, you're still going to lose the weight despite the adrenals trying to hold on to fat. Then that's only going to work when you're on the medication. Now, we use GLPs, especially at a microdose, a lot with women in perimenopause and menopause, because I feel like if it's used the right way, it can be an amazing tool. Really, GLP is a peptide, and so that means a chain of amino acids that our body naturally produces that we're giving it a little bit more of, which, if used in the right way, so helpful. But in that case, what we're doing is we're addressing the hormone changes, one, that may have caused the change in metabolism. So we're addressing the root cause. We're addressing the root cause of reviewing your lifestyle and making some big changes. There's actually studies that suggest that you're more easily to make those kind of changes when you're on GLP because of the impact of the GLPs on the brain, that you're able to be better at making those changes in your routine or making better food choices. And so now's the time to do it. Get that little bit of support and lose the weight, but then you have to be committed to continuing some of those healthy habits long term. And it's really helpful for women in perimenopause and menopause because of those changes we talked about with testosterone and its impact on insulin sensitivity. A lot of women are doing all the right things, and then they show up with, that insulin resistance, and they're like, how did this happen? And it's not really that they've had a horrible diet or anything like that. It's more these hormone changes have made them prone to that. And so using a small dose of a GLP alongside addressing hormone changes and lifestyle can be a game changer.
I think my biggest concern is that one still has to be active. And when I've come across women who are very happy with the weight loss, but then I think there's another side to things that if things are extreme and they're not addressing the physical activity, that now what does muscle mass loss look like going forward?
It doesn't look sexy.
Or no, it does not.
Losing all your muscle,
it does not.
Just losing the fat, and now you have no muscle structure. That's.
Or what about
really
bone mineral density too?
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's negatively impacting all of that. I mean, there are GLP options that are suggested to have less negative impact on decreased muscle, but overall, if you're not getting sufficient nutrient intake, it's going to impact all of those things and not be a healthy choice. And so I really wouldn't recommend doing it without the support of somebody who can help you with that lifestyle factor.
Some people talk about how hormone therapy there's a price tag to it, and that some people will say, it's something I can't afford, whether it's HRT or whether it's another, if they're trying for a GLP-1 or peptides or things like that.
Yeah.
How do you help patients find the means to see the value if someone comes to you and they're afraid of the route they're going under now, and they want to tap into one of these resources?
Yeah.
What are some of the points that you mentioned to make it a realistic picture of whether someone chooses to do one of those protocols or not?
Yeah. I mean, step one, just get that understanding, because you're not making a decision to move forward with hormone replacement or anything else. Just understanding where your body's at as far as those sex hormones, the adrenals, thyroid, other nutrients that could be missing and impacting your health, and seeing what those options are to improve your health. a lot of times, like we said, I'm a big proponent of BHRT and believe in it, but it's sometimes one of those things that, you know, you have to experience to believe, because we've, you know, over the course of our lives, we've all tried so many different cleanses and diets and things that promised a lot.
Yeah.
You know, that's true. But if these symptoms are new, like if you're suddenly having, you know, you get to over 35 into your 40s and you're having more fatigue, more mood changes, you know, not sleeping, like it's worth a try. And it's not something that you have to stick with forever. If it makes a night and day change, that it can for most women, then it's worth the money.
And I honestly, I remember one of the things that you said when I first met you. It's been 6 years ago.
That's crazy.
I can't even believe that.
Yeah.
You once said, if it were up to me, and this is circling back to your theme about your approach to hormones, if it were up to me, women would be talking about their hormones at age 35, and by age 40, there would be mandatory testing. I'll never forget when you told me that. I was like, did you say that? And you were like, yes, I said that. And I'm like, wow, okay. So one of the biggest obstacles some women face is the conversations they're having with their doctors. Why is it so tough?
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, the FDA changing is a very slow process. And, you know, even though we know things like, you know, the safety of estrogen, it's been like 20 years till it finally like changed on the label. And in primary care, we're very strictly following those guidelines. So it's not often based off of your own like understanding of the research. It's more trusting these 3-letter agencies to tell us exactly what to do. Well, if you're in your 40s now, you don't have another 25 years for, you know, all of these agencies to have their tantrums, come back around. You know, let's look at the actual research and make a decision for ourselves.
Are you pouring your heart and soul into your business, but nobody seems to notice? Are you struggling to get your offer, your expertise, your program seen by the right people? Well, you're not alone. At Lunar Marketer, we believe every business deserves to shine. That's why we specialize in boosting your visibility with a powerful mix of strategies that actually work, without the complicated systems or outdated outreach. Scan the QR code now to schedule your free consultation, or email us to learn more.
So I know you're based here in Colorado, and what are the types of patients that you have?
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about women today, but we do treat men and women. We start with treating as young as 18, especially like in cases of PCOS and things like that. You know, if you suspect there's a hormone issue, it's not going to hurt to take a look at your labs, reach out and see what's possible.
And so your website is silklife.com, and so everyone can check it out and just see just the value you bring to the table and where you are on social media. What is your one takeaway that you would, as a clinician, that you would love for those listening to this conversation, tuning into this conversation, to have?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much information out there. It can be overwhelming of like opposite views on the same topic. I would say most importantly, don't let it stop you from just getting your labs done and getting an understanding of what's happening in your body. Because whether you do something with it or not, it's going to be so valuable.
Completely agree. Tina Jacobs, I am so glad to spend some time with you this morning.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you, of course.